Shimon Prokupecz joins us right now as well. Shimon, what are you learning?
So both Pamela Brown and I have been talking to U.S. officials since this has happened, some of which whom have been briefed on the investigation. What we're being told is they believe, at least they've been briefed by people at the scene, that there was an explosion that occurred outside the venue, which then possibly caused this stampede, this sort of rush of people out of the arena that may have caused some of these injuries. Officials, it's very preliminary, and they're just starting to get some of the briefings, but it does appear there was an explosion. Obviously, as of right now, they're looking at maybe terrorism, but no one has definitively said what caused this. But they do believe there was an explosion, which then caused people to run out of the arena, which probably caused some of the fatal injuries.
So it's not clear when you say explosion outside the arena. There had been one eyewitness who'd said that possibly something near the box office. But it's not clear if actually it was kind of in the outer rim of the arena or out on the street. You're not sure.
That's exactly right, Anderson. So it could have been on the outer perimeter because, you would think there'd be security and it'd be pretty difficult for someone to bring any kind of, bomb or explosive material into the arena. So it looks like it was on the outer perimeter, and then that's what sort of caused the stampede, the rush. But again, this is just happening, and a lot of the officials who are on scene are telling us that they're still trying to piece it all together, trying to figure out exactly what happened here.
Right, and given that this now has happened several hours ago, if this had been a blast inside that arena, not only in the video we're looking at right now, would we probably see some sort of an impact zone, given that it's 20,000 people, many of whom are videotaping, particularly at the end of a concert. We would probably have video right now inside the arena if that is where this occurred. But given the fact that we have none of that video, we'll have to wait for CCTV images or anybody else who happened to be nearby to kind of, and investigators are no doubt searching for that video as well to kind of find out exactly what the cause of this explosion was.
Right, that's exactly right. When I was looking through some of this video, that's exactly what I saw. I was just trying to figure out if this had occurred inside, we probably would have seen smoke, some kind of fire, perhaps some more kind of destruction inside, and you're not seeing that in this video. I've talked to someone who basically is getting briefed from some folks on the scene, and they basically say that it did occur on the perimeter. Pamela Brown has spoken to someone who gave her the same sort of information. And when you do, it's exactly like you said, Anderson. When you look at that video, it doesn't look like any of this happened inside.
Right. Shimon Prokupecz, I appreciate you working your sources. Pamela Brown as well. Phil Black is with us, as well as Eric Hall. Phil, just from as you work both at the CIA and the FBI, for news organizations, often the early reports that we get, eyewitness reports, turn out to be inaccurate because 3 or 4 people say they heard multiple blasts, but what they really heard is the same blast, or one, they saw one gunman, but they saw them in different locations, and so people make it more than it is. What do you, from investigators, what is the, the British intelligence, British investigators doing right now? I'm sorry, actually, Phil Black, let's go to you. Are you hearing any public statements from British police?
No further update from their initial reports, which was simply a significant incident, reports of an explosion, asking people to stay away. Emergency services and first responders are trying to get in there still to try and deal with that very human need that has followed this. So what you're talking about there is absolutely true, Anderson. We don't have a sense precisely of what caused this. Consistently now, I think we are hearing from witnesses that there was one loud blast. Initially, there were reports of more, but increasingly the consistent line coming through from witnesses on the ground is that there was one loud noise of some kind just outside the main arena itself. You've made the point that from the video that we can see within the arena, there is no obvious sign of some sort of explosion or detonation there. No smoke, no point of blast. But what you can see from that video clearly is the terror as people try to get out of there in one large, huge crush.
Phil, let me just interrupt you. Manchester police have just confirmed 19 deaths have been confirmed, 19 fatalities, around 55 people have been injured. Again, you saw that long line of ambulances heading toward the arena. So this is the first actual confirmation of fatalities, 19 confirmed dead, 55 people injured so far. Steve Hall, you worked with and I'm just being told the explosion was at 10:35 p.m. 10:35 p.m. local time. It is now 1:13 a.m. Local time. So this was some 10, 11, 12, 3 hours, almost, just about 3 hours ago. Steve Hall, from your work in intelligence over the years, in terms of the investigation, in these kind of early hours, with all these conflicting reports come in, how difficult is it with these large numbers of people in this arena to kind of sift through eyewitness accounts?
Yeah, Anderson, I mean, it's, especially in the early going, it's extremely chaotic. The police and law enforcement obviously have the lead, not just in the early steps of the investigation to try to determine, was it a terrorist attack, could it have been something else, but also just to triage the situation to make sure that, people who are injured get taken care of, just basic crowd control, and also, as you mentioned earlier, trying to make sure that if there are key witnesses, that those people, remain, or at least reachable in the future. But what's going on behind that in terms of the intelligence service pieces is that you've got all the different disciplines, the human intelligence, signals intelligence, going back over recent intelligence and saying, okay, was there any indication? Did we miss something? And most importantly, is there any indication that this is only the first of perhaps a series of attacks? So some of the technical collection stuff becomes incredibly important. That gives you, in an attempt for the intelligence services are attempting to determine whether or not there are other indications that would give law enforcement and the government indications that there may be something else coming in the future. It takes time. The intelligence piece, you have to collect it and then analyze it. But in the coming hours, you can be sure that the Brits will be working very hard. They'll also be reaching out, I think, to the cooperative intelligence relationships that they have with other Western intelligence services, saying, "Had you guys heard anything? What can you guys bring to the table that will help us determine whether there could be additional attacks, not just getting to the bottom of the attack that's already occurred?"
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you think back to the attacks in Paris that we saw. There were multiple explosions. There was an attempt to attack at a soccer match. That really the bombs there were detonated outside because they found it difficult to get inside. Security at an event, something like this, in Great Britain no less, is going to be tight. Bags are going to be searched. Most likely their magnetometers as people are entering the venue.
Yeah, the security when you have any large event, and this was, by all accounts, a good-sized event, but especially for even larger things, the cooperation between the intel guys and the law enforcement folks is critical because you have concentric circles of security. You have rings of security, starting at the outside with just, a police presence and then getting more and more aggressive as you get closer to the venue. So the initial reporting sounds consistent that, if it was a terrorist attacker or whoever the attacker was, got probably through the initial stuff, got close enough, but then, when it became impossible to go much further, perhaps decided, to detonate an explosive or something. That's all speculation, but that's consistent with some of the things that we've seen in the past when you have these concentric circles of security around a big event like this one.
And Steve, I mean, we are now nearly 3 hours after this event, this explosion took place. We're told now, according to Manchester Police, explosion, or whatever it was, took place at 10:35 p.m. local time. Is now 1:17 a.m. How long does an early investigation like this how does it play out? What is the timeline on something like this? I mean, how many hours does it usually take before a greater picture is known, before CCTV camera images are looked at? Great Britain has an awful lot of cameras on the streets, a lot of eyes everywhere.
Yeah. No, London itself, as well as most other British cities and other locations in the UK have a very, very pervasive video coverage capability. So that's a good news, bad news story. The good news is that it's likely that something is on a camera someplace. The bad news, of course, is that you have to process that, and you have to do it in a timely fashion. Rest assured, these guys are crashing on this, trying to find out, where are their tips and where are their indications. You remember with the Zarnea brothers, it took, geez, I can't remember how long, but a considerable amount of time before the video of that Boston bombing attack yielded information that was actionable. So they're going to try to push as hard as they get, but a lot of it just depends on how lucky they get, how much information they're able to get in these first hours. But it's definitely going to be a long night for both the law enforcement and intelligence folks over in the UK.
And Phil Black, I just want if for our viewers who are just joining us, you see it on the screen, Manchester police now confirming 19 people have been killed, around 50 or so injured. Do we have a sense of anything about the extent of those injuries, and has everybody been treated? I mean, given that it's been 3 hours, I assume most of the people have been taken from the scene, most of the wounded and the injured. We saw those ambulances either heading to or leaving from the venue.
Yeah, it's very likely that those who need help are currently receiving it. You wouldn't think there'd be any more people waiting at this time. But I think the shocking thing are the figures that we're hearing now from the police itself. At least 19 people killed and 50 wounded. And as we've been talking about, this is an Ariana Grande concert. This is mostly young people, teenagers, possibly children with parents. Those are the sorts of people that were caught up in the middle of this and were terrified as they left the venue shortly afterwards. There's another key line in the police statement which has only just been released and which we're talking about now, and that is the police say this is currently being treated as a terrorist incident until police know otherwise. I guess you could say that's pretty standard in a sense, but what they're not doing is speculating, but they are assuming perhaps the worst case scenario here at the moment, and that is that this was an organized attack. And if that is the case, then as we've seen from previous incidents here in the UK, the initial concern is getting first responders there to help the wounded and getting them the help they need, but also trying to determine to what extent there could be a further threat there at the location or perhaps in other places as well. So the police will be in the process of locking that place down, searching it incredibly thoroughly to be absolutely sure that the threat to people there and to the emergency services and first responders who are working there, well, that has in fact passed and there is no further threat or the possibility of further loss of life there as well.
And Steve Hall, I mean, this does present real challenges for law enforcement, not just investigating what happened, but when you have an arena with 20,000 people and there's been some sort of explosion outside, local authorities on the scene in that moment are faced with the idea of, I assume, do they just try to get everybody out of the venue out of fear that there may be something more inside? Or is having 20,000 people exit a venue that make them potential targets if it was some other aspect of this incident waiting outside?
Yeah, I think in my experience working with law enforcement, mostly foreign law enforcement, not U.S. law enforcement in cases like this, they're gonna try to clear the area as soon as possible because there is always a concern of, you know, are there other explosive devices that have not yet been detonated? You'll recall that was a key question in the St. Petersburg metro bombings that happened recently in Russia. The Russians did indeed end up finding another device in another metro car. So I think the key thing for law enforcement at this point is to clear the area to make sure that there's no other that there are no other risks you know, that could do further damage at that particular site. But it's extremely chaotic. They are going to want to try to be in contact with people to get key and critical information that'll help unravel this. So that's trying to keep track of people who they're at the same time trying to get out of the area is going to be a challenge as well. But there's so much data out there right now that they're trying to pull down, corroborate, and try to make sense of that. It's going to be at least a number of hours before either the intelligence or law enforcement folks have a better idea as to what really happened.
Joining us also Sam Ward right now, who lives nearby. I understand heard the blast. Sam's joining us on the phone. Sam, can you just explain what you heard and if you saw anything?
Yeah, so we heard an extremely loud bang. It was really sharp, really sudden, nothing like I've ever heard in the city centre before. Sorry, just as you was talking then, we've just had 7 ambulances exit the Manchester Central Fire Station, all with blue lights and sirens flashing, and really rushed down to the arena. I'm not too sure what's just happened, but there was a large amount of ambulances just left the venue then. I'm currently looking at a roadblock. There's at least another 25 ambulances positioned on the pavement, just almost literally sat there waiting. There's 5 or 6 fire engines that I can see, all with the crew stood by just as if they're waiting to be given the nod again to just go. a very, very, very large police presence, all from tactical aid units through to armed response, just to general police. I don't know if you can hear the sirens, but something is kicking off again, whether it's a second. It seems to be coming in waves. All the convoys, none of the vehicles seem to be moving on their own. They all seem to be 5 or 6 deep at any one time. The firemen are actually running into the fire station now. I'm not too sure what's happening. Yeah, it's just absolutely mental at the moment.
So, Sam, about how far away from this arena do you live, or are you?
I'm 200 meters. 200 meters from the arena, and I'm about 100 meters away from the city centre fire station, which is a very large city centre fire station. They've got two forecourts plus an overspill car park, which is all currently being occupied from everything from Salvation Army vehicles all the way through to the ambulances and the rapid response vehicles as well.
And Sam, have most of the people who were in the arena, I mean, we were told some 20,000 people were there, are they gone from the area now?
Yeah, the area is still, it's very quiet. It's very quiet for the city centre. Initially, after the first wave of sirens and the initial evacuation, it was filled with cars. The roads were absolutely bedlam, people just going through red lights. It was very much families. There was kids, mums and dads. They were all doing everything they could to get out of the city centre, and it looks like the emergency services did a really good job of managing that traffic, because it was only sort of bedlam for about 5 minutes, and now the roads are extremely still. I'm not too sure if you can hear it, but we've got 2 helicopters above us, both hovering extremely low. You can almost feel the thud from the blades coming from them.
Sam, I appreciate you talking to us, and I appreciate your clear head in all this and describing what you were seeing right now. Sam Ward, thank you so much. Freelance photographer Joel Goodman is also on the phone joining us. Joel, I understand you arrived at the scene. Can you tell me when you got there, how soon after whatever this was, whatever kind of an explosion it was, and what you saw and heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got there quite early, to be honest. It's difficult to say, but when I arrived, there were quite a few sort of walking wounded, lots of ambulance and police running around backwards and forwards, treating people who were bandaged up and quite severe injuries, both on the ground and sort of walking. Very quickly, they've sort of pushed cordons back further and further, obviously trying to keep the area clear and safe, and so they can work safely in there. But I could probably give you an exact time if you gave me a minute. Hang on a second.
We understand the blast itself took place at 10:35 p.m. So if you know what time.
Okay, thank you. That's more than I know. I got there at 11:20.
Okay. You said you saw a number of kind of walking wounded people with injuries. I obviously don't want to get into too much detail, but the nature of the injuries was there anything you could deduce from that? Whether they were people, there's a question of how much injuries were caused by the explosion or blast itself, how much may have been people being, pushed, or the crush of people trying to leave.
The injuries I saw, I'm not an expert on that, and I couldn't say for certain, but it didn't look like the sort of injury you'd get just tripping over someone in a hurry. You're talking about people with bandages on their heads and their legs with blood. So yeah, I think it was more severe than that.
Do you have any sense, Sam, Joel, of where this blast actually occurred in? Because we're told it seems from the video we're seeing it's unlikely that it was actually inside the arena itself, given that we've seen video from in the arena and there's no sign of it, that it may have been on the outskirts of the arena. And we're looking at one of the photos you took of a gentleman being helped, it looks like, or several people being helped. Do you have an idea of where this blast may have occurred?
Well, those pictures were taken near the entrance of Victoria Station, which is a railway station adjacent to the arena, and they sort of link up internally. Once you get into the station, there's a box office area before you get into the arena. I don't know where these injuries occurred, but I imagine it would be between where I was stood and that box office area, just based on gut, on what I could see. But I don't know that for certain.
So can you just explain the geography of that? Because that's interesting, because there had been other reports that perhaps this occurred somewhere near a box office. You're saying that the subway station, the tube station, actually links up with the arena?
Well, it's a railway station, so it's an overground station called Victoria Station. And yes, it and the arena effectively adjoin. So you walk from one to the other via the same route. You're sort of part of it.
And when you talk about a box office, is that a box office for the train, or is that a box office for the arena itself?
No, that would be the box office for the arena. So the box office for the arena is accessible from, there's a train and a Metrolink station, again, overground tram, which link via a walkway. So the idea is you can come straight from the arena and get straight on a tram.
And Joel, I'm just getting word that the arena itself just tweeted out that this incident took place outside the venue in a public space. That's a tweet from the Manchester Arena. So just, if I could just get specific on that box office that you talked about, you said someone getting off a train could walk heading toward the box office without...
You'd walk sort of 2 minutes from the train or the tram, you'd go up a flight of stairs and across a very short walkway, and you'd be at the box office of the arena. So
and there's no security...
One hub.
Is there security for before the box office, or is security, I assume, after the box office?
Yeah, I mean, it's domestic security, so it's sort of for everyday sort of stuff, like, you know, in case something goes wrong on an everyday level rather than specifically. I mean, like, there's lots of armed police in and around the streets right now, which for Manchester is extremely unusual to see. There wouldn't have been routinely any armed police on the streets. There would be low-key, and there certainly wouldn't be anyone with a weapon at all in the arena officially.
In terms of being searched, in terms of when you would be searched before going to the arena, it would be after the box office, I assume.
Yeah, box office, and there's a queue from the arena space where everyone is searched. I mean, I was covering an event there 2 days ago, and everyone gets searched going in, everyone gets patted down.
Okay.
So you've got like a public space, which is, as I say, the bit which is joins with the train station, and then you've got the arena space.
Joel, that helps in trying to...
searched and patted down going in routinely.
Yeah, we appreciate it. It helps to try to piece together what may have happened. Joel Goodman, thank you so much. I want to go back to our Shimon Prokupecz, who has got more reporting. Shimon, what are you learning?
That's right, Anderson. We're just getting word into our newsroom in Washington, D.C., that the possible cause into this explosion was a suicide bomber. 3 officials who've been briefed on this investigation, 2 U.S. officials and a Western official to Pamela Brown, all have said that right now investigators on the scene believe that a suicide bomber detonated a bomb as people were leaving the venue, which then caused all of these injuries and the deaths. This is, again, it's very preliminary because investigators are still trying to piece together what happened. You know, though it is a couple of hours into this explosion, there still seems not to be 100% certainty as to what caused this. But they do believe right now that this was some kind of a terrorist act and that potentially a suicide bomber set off a bomb.
And as far as what you're hearing, there was just one person, one possible suicide bomber.
That's right, and I spoke to actually a U.S. official on that, Anderson, who basically said, you know, if this is a suicide bomber, this changes everything, because the question now becomes how did this person get to the venue? Is there a larger network behind this? And so now that process is underway to try and figure out who this person was, who is he working with? Are there others out there who may be plotting other similar explosions?
Shimon, I appreciate that. Continue to work at your sources. We'll check in with you, with Pamela Brown as well. Joining us now is CNN terrorism analyst Paul Cruikshank. Paul, the notion that Shimon Prokupecz is reporting based on 3 sources that he and Pamela Brown have talked to, that this would have been a suicide bomber, that certainly does change the situation just in terms of the investigation. It's very unlikely that a suicide bomber would actually manufacture the device or the vest that they themselves were using. Usually it's somebody else who is too valuable for whatever this group is to actually detonate it themselves.
Well, Anderson, we don't know that yet. We have seen some instances where there have been individuals who've taken action, managed to build their own devices. In the past, we saw that in New York City, the Chelsea devices back in September of last year. But certainly the concern at this hour will be that there is a cell, a Islamist terrorist cell behind this. They'll be worried about follow-on attacks. It's not lost right now on British authorities that with the Paris attacks back in November 2015, there was also an attack on a concert hall, the Bataclan, that night, and that was part of a multi-wave coordinated attack on the French capital. So that's why you're seeing a lot of armed presence right now on the streets of Manchester, concerned that there could be follow-on attacks from the rest of this cell, if indeed there is a cell involved in this. A very worrying night for British authorities. I've been told in recent weeks by British officials that the threat level here is blinking red when it comes to Islamist terrorism, higher than at any point in British history. That's because of the fact that so many British nationals, residents of this country, have gone off and fought in Syria and Iraq, joining groups like ISIS. Almost 900 have made the trip. A good number have returned to the UK. They're seeing increased return rates coming back really right throughout Europe, Anderson. But there's also a big homegrown radicalization problem which is fueling this. Radicals who are staying behind and are being encouraged by groups like ISIS to take action and being given instructions over the internet, over these secure, encrypted channels in how to do that.
Paul, correct me, you know this better than I do, certainly. If memory serves me correct, Manchester, we have seen arrests in Manchester in recent years, have we not?
That's right. We've seen quite a few arrests in Manchester in the years since 9/11. There has been a sort of local Islamist scene there, the problem of extremism in Manchester and the surrounding areas. Back in 2009, there was a major al-Qaeda plot targeting a shopping centre in the city, which was really thwarted at the last minute by British authorities at Easter 2009. And we've seen other arrests in the city over the last few years. We've seen people move from that area to Syria and Iraq. People move from Syria and Iraq back to those parts of the UK. So that's kind of the mix that they're faced with right now. A very elevated terrorist threat, and of course there's a general election coming up here in just a couple of weeks. ISIS has not yet got a big attack through in the UK. They've got big attacks through in other countries. There was, of course, that attack, which was inspired, it seems, by ISIS back in March. The driver, Khalid Massoud, in Westminster, who killed 4 people, knocked over pedestrians, stabbed a policeman. But there has not been a mass casualty attack that's got through by a group like ISIS. Really, since the London bombings all the way back in 2005. But at this hour, no claim of responsibility yet from any terrorist group. So we're going to have to wait and see. But they're scrambling right now in Manchester. All over the UK, this country tonight is on maximum alert. We're going to have to see if that threat level goes up. We'll expect there to be a Cobra meeting of the Prime Minister at Downing Street, I think, in the hours ahead. They're very, very concerned.
Paul, I just learned Manchester police are reporting that there will be a controlled explosion of some sort of what they deem a suspicious item about a block away from the arena in an open space that is called Cathedral Gardens. Again, this is going to be a controlled detonation of a suspicious device, Paul, which is pretty standard procedure. This is about a block away. Oftentimes, if this is, in fact, a suicide attack, we have seen it's become almost commonplace in these kinds of things to have multiple attacks or even diversionary attacks. Even in the Bataclan, as I recall, there were, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, if memory serves me, two people who attempted to detonate devices and did detonate devices outside a soccer stadium.
That's right. I mean, in Paris back in November 2015, there were essentially 3 waves of attacks. One was at the Bataclan concert hall. 3 the kamikaze suicide bombers armed with Kalashnikovs that killed some security guards outside, stormed the concert and killed almost 90 people in a space of just about 10 or 20 minutes before the police response came. At the same time, that night, there were attacks on cafes by a group led by Abdelhamid Abaoud, the ringleader in that plot. And so this was a sort of coordinated strike back in Paris in November of 2015, Anderson. We haven't seen any reports of that yet so far in the UK, but there's concern that there may be more coming down the pipeline when it comes to this threat.
And, Paul, you were saying that, I mean, how does this change now that there is reports that this may have been a suicide bomber, just in terms of the level of attention the intelligence services pays to this? How does that ratchet this up?
Well, obviously, a suicide bomber, I mean, that would be the hallmarks of an Islamist terrorist plot, attack. So they'll be looking in that direction tonight if they indeed do confirm that there was a suicide bomber involved. There are also eyewitnesses interviewed just in the last few minutes on BBC radio talking about what they described as nuts lying all over the floor, and that would be consistent with a kind of shrapnel type of device which we've seen groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS encourage their recruits to build. So that's certainly where this is pointing tonight. We cannot conclude that for sure at this stage. We're going to have to wait for police to tell us much more in the hours ahead. But given the fact that they're looking into this real possibility, and there is, it would appear, some evidence that this was a suicide bombing, that certainly takes you down the Islamist terrorist direction. It must also be noted that in recent months in Europe, there have been a number of false flag plots where right-wing extremists have tried to frame Islamists for terrorism. We've seen that in Germany in recent weeks. But a suicide bomber really does take you down the direction of Islamist terrorism.
It also, if it was an individual or individuals, given the amount of surveillance cameras that I imagine are around this arena, certainly Great Britain has an extensive video surveillance network, CCTV network. The fact that if it was an individual, they tried to, it seemed, time it for when people would have been leaving this venue at around 10:35 p.m., there would probably be relatively easy to find, given that there's also a train station attached to this, CCTV footage of somebody, this person, waiting around or approaching. It won't be long before investigators are able to figure out, Paul, kind of the direction this person came from and get an image of this person, I would think.
Oh, that's right. They'll already be looking through all those tapes, and they'll presumably be able to retrace where this person came from, how they traveled, if they were on public transport. Nearly every train and bus and metro in this country has some kind of CCTV capability. So they'll be able to presumably very quickly identify who this individual is, who they may be connected to. There'll also be a lot of forensics at the scene in terms of DNA, of fingerprint analysis to see if this is somebody on their radar screen. And we've seen in so many plots really on both sides of the Atlantic that the individuals who have perpetrated these attacks have already at some point been on the radar screen of security officials, and it's very difficult for the intelligence services to monitor everybody all the time. They just have the resources to monitor a fraction of the people that they consider a threat. We saw with the Westminster attacker just a few weeks ago here in the UK, Khalid Massoud, that he at a certain point several years previously had been on the radar screen of MI5, the British security services. So they'll be putting all that together, trying to figure out what, if any, network was behind this, and they'll be racing to make arrests if necessary to prevent follow-on attacks.
We should also point out we have just gotten word that there's going to be a Manchester Police press conference in the next several minutes. We're obviously going to bring that to you live when it happens for the latest of information. But right now, Manchester Police have confirmed 19 people have been killed. At least around 50 or so people have been injured. Police say that they're going to have a controlled detonation of what they determined to be a suspicious device very close to this arena. And they are looking at this based on the reporting of Shimon Prokupez and our Pamela Brown, based on 3 different sources, 2 U.S., 1 Western, with knowledge of the incident, that they are looking at this as a possible suicide bomber. A lot of questions obviously still to be heard, and hopefully in that press conference we'll get a lot more information. Phil Mudd is joining us. Phil, you worked at CIA and also obviously FBI. Just in terms of when you see this, what goes through your mind? What's happening on the ground?
First nightmares of living through this for 10 years post 9/11, remembering as a practitioner. But looking forward, what happens here, you see this in two waves. The first is the immediate event. What do they find at the scene? What are people saying? The eyewitnesses will not be reliable. But questions like the forensic analysis.
Not reliable because so many people see things from a different vantage point. It's just too confusing.
It's not confusing. People will say it was a yellow shirt, it was a blue car. They're inevitably wrong, and then they will confirm that over time because their mind starts to say, I'm sure I saw a yellow car. I'm sure I saw a blue shirt. Not true. What I want to see is the video. I want to see what happened with the device. For example, not only what kind of a device it was, but does it bear a resemblance from devices you've seen elsewhere that suggest somebody trained them who has trained other operatives?
Devices have a certain signature.
They do, and the people who train you to do this kind of thing are not going to train you on 10 different kinds of devices. So that could quickly tell you whether this person came from, for example, a Syrian training center. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying the people who conduct that kind of training are going to have a standard type of device that they train you on.
The possibility of a suspicious package could be an abundance of caution. It also would not be out of the realm of possibility that somebody would want to plant multiple devices.
Yeah, that's going to tell me a lot if it turns out to be a device that's actually active. What that will tell me is, did someone bring in two devices? I doubt it. That's immediately bringing to my mind the suggestion that this wasn't one person, it was two, or going to maybe someone who wasn't just a lone wolf. Do we have a conspiracy here?
Although it could also just be someone who, in panic, dropped it back.
Could have been. What you see in these situations when you get a perimeter like this is panic. That person is high-strung, emotional high alert. If they were, for example, approached by a security official, they're immediately going to be saying, I better detonate now because if I don't, my whole opportunity is lost. That's why security perimeters are so important. It might have been worse if it turns out that this was a device with a suicide attacker, if they hadn't obviously been intercepted at the perimeter. But somebody with that kind of alert mental state, that kind of emotional disturbance, as soon as they get confronted, more than likely is going to say, I better go now.
On the phone is joining us is Paula Robinson, who I'm told was nearby and pitched in to help. Paula, if you could just tell what you saw, what you heard.
Hello. We was on Victoria train station waiting for our train home, and we heard an explosion. We heard and felt a loud, just one explosion. As we evacuated, we're about 10 yards from the arena. When we got outside, everyone was running from the arena. As we passed, there were children that were supposed to meet the parents outside there. We just got hold of them and said, come on, we need to get away. So I took them to the Holiday Inn, which was a safe distance away. Spoke to the parents on the way to safety, and they were picked up.
Paula, let me ask you, had you attended the concert?
No, we hadn't. We was out for our anniversary, but we were at the station, which is right at the side of the arena.
You said you heard the explosion. Do you have any sense of how close it may have been to you, how loud it was?
Well, we could feel the explosion as well as hear it. It was just like, it was muffled, but it was just like a huge boom.
Wait, when you said you could feel... Sorry, when you said you could feel it, are you talking about kind of an air blast or shaking of the ground?
Just like a shaking of the ground, possibly.
Okay. And
you could just feel it. It was very, very loud.
Our understanding is that the explosion took place around 10:35 p.m., according to Manchester Police. Were there many people in the area where you were? Had many people already exited the venue?
Well, we were just at the side. People were... But as we got out, literally outside is the arena, where hundreds and hundreds of people were just coming down. There's sort of like two lots of steps. They were coming down the steps onto the main walkway to leave, but they were just all evacuating quickly by the time we got outside. So everyone left. As soon as they heard it, everyone seemed to be going.
And were police already at the scene when you got there?
No, not at the time, but very, very soon afterwards there was ambulance, police. I don't think people really knew what was going on. The sellers outside were still selling T-shirts. We were having to like get past them and stuff like that. People didn't seem, and then all of a sudden there was panic and everyone just ran everywhere.
Well, Paula, it's lovely that you reacted the way you did to try to help those kids and get them to a safe place and able to contact their parents. Thank you so much. I'm glad you and the people you're with are okay on your anniversary. Jamie Waller was at the concert, joins us now by phone as well. If you could, Jamie, just explain what you heard and saw.
She'd just finished singing, and she walked off the stage, and we all went down to go out. And there was just this huge explosion, this huge bang, and everyone just like looked at each other, and everyone just ran. We just needed to get out because we didn't know what was happening. It was just a mad panic.
So as soon as you heard this explosion, you knew this was not part of the concert itself?
Yeah, we knew something was wrong.
And so had the concert had ended, Ariana Grande had stopped singing, she was off the stage?
Yeah, she just finished doing Dangerous Woman, and then she left. And she ran off the stage, and then we all obviously the lights came on, everything was finished, and then everyone started to leave, and then that's when the bang happened.
And what happened after the bang? You said people started to rush?
Yeah, we just all ran. We all just wanted to get out because it was just a mad panic. We didn't know what was happening. The first thought was we need to get out of here just in case anything happens again.
Was there any announcement made at any point as you were trying to get out?
No, nothing. We were all we didn't know what was happening at all.
How difficult was it to actually get out? I mean, it looks obviously very chaotic. Obviously, a lot of people are very frightened. There's kids there. How difficult was it to get out?
Me and my sister were out in seconds. Like, everyone was on the same page. Everyone just wanted to leave. So everyone was just running in the same direction.
And as you left, what did you do?
I just kept going. And the police were like, just carry on moving. So we just followed the crowd, and we found a place, so we stood, and then all the police started rushing all the ambulances, and there was people on the floor, and all the paramedics came around, and we were just waiting then until we knew a little bit more information.
And I assume how close were you to the train station?
I think we were above it. I'm not completely sure because it's just a state of shock, but we were literally probably meters away from it.
Well, Jamie, I'm glad you were able to get out quickly, and thank you very much for talking to us tonight. A very difficult night for so many of those who were there. Late word on that controlled explosion that we told you about a few minutes ago. According to police, the item in question, which they detonated, was abandoned clothing, nothing dangerous. And we're continuing to be here with Phil Mudd. Phil, obviously that's a good thing in that there's not, it seems like, more than this one particular incident or more than one attempt.
Sure, but anytime you're going down this road, and you've heard this referred to as a potential terrorism investigation, that's not a suggestion, that practitioners believe that's what happened. It's just you don't have time to waste in the event that there's a broader network. You talked about just one potential device here. You still have a lot of questions. Who trained them? Who radicalized them? Where'd the money come from? You can have a conspiracy even if you have a one-off attack, especially with a device that looks this significant. I'm looking at this saying, are we sure if this is a single suicide bomber? He had the capability to build a design like this with this level of lethality by himself. You've got to go to conspiracy, even if you have no evidence to suggest that yet.
How likely is it that somebody built their own device, or was that usually the device built by somebody else?
In this case, I'm going to look at this saying, if you have a one-off, that to me starts to decrease the likelihood of a conspiracy that involves somebody overseas training. The one piece here that I'm looking at is the size and potential sophistication of the device, but there's a clear signal you can look at in these investigations. As soon as you get more than one person, the likelihood you have outside assistance, that they sat around and sought a bomb maker, for example, overseas, could help them increase. When you have a one-off individual, the likelihood he acted alone, maybe built the device alone, increases. People typically like that, in my experience, sometimes also have psychological problems. They just decide they got to do something, and they'll go do it.
Paul Cruikshank, I should just remind our viewers, we are waiting for a press conference from Manchester Police. We believe it's going to take place any minute. At the latest, we're told maybe at the top of the hour, about 7.5 minutes from now. It is 1:52 a.m. in Manchester. The investigation obviously well underway. The area has largely been cleared, Paul, Cruikshank, that we understand, from the concert goers who were there. A device was just detonated. We had an eyewitness, Sam Ward, just a few moments ago, who was looking out on the street, said there were helicopters flying low. He still saw ambulances heading toward the arena from the local fire station, which is right next to the arena. But Paul, there's a lot going on, not only in Manchester, but also in London and really probably throughout Europe at this hour as police and intelligence are trying to look for any possible leads on this.
That's right, Anderson. The entire apparatus that the British have put together to counter terrorism since 9/11 is going into full gear tonight, into full gear to understand where this threat came from and whether there are more threats out there. Given the fact that we're hearing the possibility that this was a suicide bombing, the concern will be that this was an act of Islamist terrorism. The concern will be a group like Al-Qaeda or ISIS could be behind it, groups with networks of operatives who have cell structures which they can potentially put into operation for these kind of attacks. But it shouldn't be ruled out that this could be a single individual, somebody who's managed to put a device together just on their own. We've seen ISIS over these encrypted apps online reach out to sympathizers and operatives in the West, providing very detailed bomb-making instructions. They'll be doing a lot of forensics right now at the scene to try to see what type of explosive was used. Was it something like TATP, which has emerged as a signature for ISIS in its recent attacks in Europe, notably in Paris, in Brussels, or was it some other type of explosive that was used? Given the force of the blast, it may well be that this was a high explosive that was used, a devastating high explosive in a confined space. They'll be running all of the CCTV to try and trace back where this attacker came from, which address, how they were acting in the minutes before the attack. Were they given something by anybody that's being caught by the huge number of CCTV cameras all across Manchester? This investigation is really going to be going at full speed, and the key concern is to prevent future attacks, more attacks from any kind of cell that's still out there, Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, when you look, and again, we are waiting a press conference any minute now, we're going to bring that to you. Paul, when you look at the volume of attacks that we have seen in the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere, do you have a sense of how many of suicide bombings, how many were carried out by just an individual who manufactured their own device and went ahead and did this, whether they were encouraged online or not, and how many, or is the vast majority of this somebody who is connected to some sort of a network, whether it's a sophisticated network or just a couple of individuals?
We've seen plots, many plots, with just individuals who plan to be suicide bombers. We've also seen plots from networks, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, where that's the case. I don't think that gets us anywhere closer to knowing whether this was a single individual who was responsible for this or a wider cell. I think those answers are going to come in the hours ahead. The first we'll know about it is if there are major raids across Manchester. And what we hear from the results of those. I think given the fact they'll be going through all the CCTV, trying to figure out where this person was living, that there are likely to be raids in the hours ahead in different locations, perhaps in the UK. We often see that after these kinds of incidents. But this appears to have been a major mass casualty terrorist attack, and this country has not suffered one of those since the London bombings all the way back in 2005. And that's really a testament to the professionalism of British security services, who are regarded by many of their peers around the world as best in class. They put a lot of resources, a lot of technology behind preventing what we saw play out just a few hours ago in Manchester. But given the scale of the threat, they cannot stop all kind of attacks getting through. We saw a terrorist attack getting through just a few weeks ago on a bridge in Westminster, and the reality is that there will be more attacks that will get through in the months and years ahead, especially as ISIS loses ground in Syria and Iraq, and more of these foreign fighters start gravitating back to Europe. The people who are trained killers coming back with an axe to grind against countries like Britain, who have been launching airstrikes in Syria and Iraq.